All right, good morning, Rabbi Sai. I am Rabbi Kalman, Akiva, Kovacs, filling in for the Rav this week. It's a real pleasure, honor to be here and to learn the Daf Yomi with you in person and from a distance. And it's a bit icy, so take your time getting here. And when you do get here, welcome, and hopefully we'll get a minyan later. But it's pretty empty right now. Today's Daf is 72 Ayin Beis. And we actually finished through the bottom of 71. Hold on, pull up the sponsorships here. It is Monday, February 1st. Our Talmud Torah sponsorship is the Elbaum family for the recent yahrzeit in memory of Gerald Elbaum, Yaakov Kafil ben Avraham Monach Zal, loving father of Avron, Shan, and Judah Elbaum, and loving husband of Shirley Elbaum. May his memory be a blessing and remain eternal in our hearts. And by Bracha Strimber in loving memory of Avi Strimber, that's Avraham ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi Zal, and his 9th yahrzeit. Thank you for those sponsorships. The Week of Learning is sponsored by Gail and Doug Stenger in honor of their grandson, Etiel Mordechai Weinberg, who will become Bar Mitzvah, Mazel Tov, Parshas Yisro. He will also be called to Torah on Shvat 23, the morning minyan. That'll be Thursday, God willing, so that in this unprecedented time, family members can share in the simcha. That'll be great. And by Moshe and Devorah Werdesheim for Refuah Shlema for Yara Gittel Bas Shai Etzel. And we also have a Daf Yomi sponsorship, Yagdil Rav Yadir, by Frank and Danielle Storch, Leilui Nishmas Moshe Aryeh ben Avraham Shraga Faivish Zol. So thank you for all the sponsorships, a lot of sponsorships, Baruch Hashem. And now we're going to get started on Ayin Beis, Daf 72 in Pesachim. And Baruch Hashem, we finished the Mishnah on 71b, but we are going to be referring back to that Mishnah numerous times, so don't worry if you missed the Mishnah. You'll make it up later, but we are going to discuss the first half of that Mishnah in some detail today. And recall that the main point of contention in the Mishnah yesterday was a concept the Rav introduced us to called Toeh B'Dvar Mitzvah. Someone's making a mistake when they're trying to do a mitzvah. And in short, Bekitzer, Rabbi Eliezer had said that even if he's trying to do a mitzvah, Lamaisa, he's not doing a mitzvah, so he's chayav for breaking Shabbos. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua had said, it's Shabbos, and we're going to see he's trying to slaughter a carbon Pesach, which is allowed. He's trying to do a mitzvah, so we're going to let him off the hook on Shabbos, even though he's not doing a mitzvah, Lamaisa, but he's trying to do a mitzvah. That's where his intention is, so he's not chayav on Shabbos. We're going to see other cases similar to that, where he's toeh b'devar mitzvah in today's learning. So that's going to be the main overarching theme today, is toeh b'devar mitzvah. When is somebody making a mistake, trying to do a mitzvah, going to be off the hook for other problems? So right at the top of Ayin Beis, Amud Aleph, B'mayos Kinan, what are we dealing with? What are we dealing with in the first line of the Mishnah? Which we're going to go right back. A Pesach sheshachtu shelo lishmo. This is in the mitzvah b'Shabbos. A Pesach that someone slaughtered not for the sake of the carbon Pesach. He said it would be for the sake of a chatas, for the sake of a toda, something else. Chayev alav chatas. He has to bring a carbon chatas for breaking Shabbos, because he's doing an illegal slaughter on Shabbos. And slaughter, shechita is one of the lamites malachos. He's doing one of the lamites malachos on Shabbos, and he's not doing it for an acceptable, approved use of bringing a carbon Pesach. If he was really bringing a carbon Pesach, we have a drasha before that's allowed, and actually it's a mitzvah. You have to do that when the 14th of Nisan falls on Shabbos. You have to shecht your Pesach on that very day, on the 14th of Nisan, so that the Pesach itself is doche Shabbos. So B'mayos Kinan, the Gemara says, what are we talking about in our Mishnah? What is this guy actually doing when he slaughters his Pesach for something else? Ilema b'toeh. Are we saying he's making a mistake? What's going on is he's not really aware that this animal's not a Pesach. He thinks it's a Pesach. He thought it was a Pesach. Now he's thinking it's something else, so he's really making a mistake in his intention. He's toeh. Toeh means he's making a mistake. Shamat mina, we would learn from this, Akira b'taut, that in a mistaken uprooting of the sanctity of the animal to something else, havia akira, that's a legal, valid uprooting of the sanctity. So that would mean that mistakenly changing the kedusha from a Pesach to something else would be effective legally, that's officially changed. Now that has ramifications here that he's chayev for breaking Shabbos, but it would have ramifications elsewhere where he could officially change the sanctity of a carbon even by mistake. And the first Tosfos on top, he points out, Shamas Mina Akira B'Tayos Havi Akira. You would learn from here that a mistaken uprooting is a valid uprooting. Amari says the Plukta Hi B'Tchelis, that in Menachos, we learned Menachos not so long ago, a couple of years ago, but that's a machlokis, because the svara over there is, if you purposefully, knowingly designated this animal as this carbon, you've purposely made this lamb your Paschal lamb, your Pesach offering, and now you come along and by mistake are trying to change that, but only by mistake, how could a mistake come and uproot something you did on purpose? So over there, it's a machlokis, and it's not clear that we would paskin like that at all. So we say Ella, back in our Gemara, second line, Ella ba'okir on purpose. He's purposefully redesignating his carbon Pesach as something else. Now you would understand that's better. In this case, it's worse for him, but it's better to say that that purposefully uprooting your original Kedusha and assigning a new Kedusha might be effective rather than mistakenly trying to reassign the Kedusha when you had a purposeful Kedusha to begin with. Aim a Seifa. So we say that the first part of the Mishnah is an oker. He's purposefully reassigning the Kedusha, and that's why his Pesach is no longer Lishma, and he's chayav for breaking Shabbos because he didn't have permission to bring a Pesach Shlo Lishma, because that's not a valid Pesach anymore. Aim a Seifa. But what about the next part of the Mishnah? Shar kol zvachim, and the rest of the offerings, that means something that's not a Pesach or B'sai, sheshachtan l'shum Pesach, but he went ahead and slaughtered it for the sake of a Pesach. So now he's got something else. He's got a different animal. He's got his toda or his chatas or shlamim. He's got something else, and he's doing it l'shem Pesach. So what's he doing there? Is he doing it on purpose or by mistake? Let's find out. Im einon re'uyin, if these animals are not fitting to be a Paschal lamb, which we call is from the tzon. That means a sheep or a goat, and it has to be a male, and it has to be in the first year. So if it's something else, if it's not one of those, chayiv, he's chayiv a chatas for breaking Shabbos because he did not have permission to slaughter this animal for the sake of a Pesach on Shabbos. Imruyin hand, but if they're fitting, that means they are a male minatzon, a sheep or a goat in the first year. Rabbi Eliezer Machayev Chatos. Rabbi Eliezer says he's Chayev Chatos. This is what the Mishnah had said. We're rehashing the Mishnah here. Rabbi Yeshua Poter. Rabbi Yeshua says he's Poter. Remember, this is the concept of Toeh B'Devar Mitzvah. The person slaughtering this animal, which is Raui, it could have been a Pesach. Lamaisa, it was something else. So he's not really bringing his carbon Pesach because this animal was previously assigned as a different carbon. But he's Toeh B'Devar Mitzvah. He's making a mistake trying to do a mitzvah, trying to do the mitzvah of Shchitas carbon Pesach. So Rabbi Yeshua lets him off the hook. He's putter from breaking Shabbos. The oker. So if he's doing that on purpose, oker, remember Rabbi Isai, is he's purposefully changing the Kedusha from one thing to another. He's purposefully reassigning his Toda into a Pesach. Mali Ra'uyin, Mali Shainan Ra'uyin. It wouldn't matter whether the animal is fitting to become a Pesach or not. He's doing it on purpose. And that's a problem for Rabbi Yeshua, who says, Toeh B'Devar Mitzvah, we're going to let you off the hook because it's a mistake. But oker, b'mezid, that's on purpose, purposefully doing something wrong, then you're not doing a mitzvah by mistake anymore. There's no toeh, there's no mistake anymore. So Rabbi Yeshua would say he's chayev instead of pater. Elepshita, rather it's obvious here, b'toeh, that in the second part of the Mishnah, he must be mistaken, and that's why Rabbi Yeshua applies the doctrine of toeh b'devar mitzvah is pater, that making a mistake, trying to accomplish a mitzvah, even if he didn't accomplish the mitzvah l'maisa, since his mind is on the mitzvah, he's trying to do the mitzvah, the animal could have been the mitzvah, we're going to let him off the hook for Shabbos. He's trying to do something that he had a heter to do, even though he was mistaken. So the Gemara says, Reisha be'oker, are you going to tell me the Reisha is where he's purposefully changing the designation from a Pesach to something else, and that's why he's chayiv? But remember, the Reisha, both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua agree that he's chayiv. The Seifa, you're going to tell me that's on purpose, but Seifa b'toeh, and the Seifa, the next part of the Mishnah, where if the animal's rawi, Rabbi Yeshua lets him off the hook, that's a toeh, that's a mistake, and now he's toeh b'devar mitzvah. Rabbi Avin says, yes, that's right. The Reisha is be'oker, on purpose, he's purposely changing the designation, and that's why they agree, Rabbi Eliezer and Yeshua, that he's chayiv for breaking Shabbos. The Seifa b'toeh, and the second part of the Mishnah is he's toeh, he's making a mistake. So Rabbi Yeshua applies the famous doctrine, it's famous now, of toeh b'devar mitzvah, he's making a mistake, trying to accomplish a mitzvah. So he's pater from breaking Shabbos. Beautiful. Ashkechei Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef found Rabbi Abahu Tavakai B'Echlusa De'inchi. He was standing in a big crowd of people. So Rabbi Abahu is surrounded by a bunch of people. Sounds like he's not in the base measure. He's out in the street. There's a lot of people around, a big crowd. Amrali says, Rabbi, Masnisin Mai.
the Mishnah is what? What's the Mishnah? Amrle, the Mishnah, great, I know this one. Reisha be'oker, in the beginning, the first part, he is purposefully redesignating the Kedusha of the carbon, and that's why it works, and his Pesach is no longer the Shema, and all the rabbis agree that he's chayiv for breaking Shabbos. Seifa b'toeh, and the second part, he's toeh, he's making a mistake, and that's why Rabbi Yeshua says he's toeh b'davar mitzvah, and he's pater. So beautiful, he has an answer to the Mishnah, like we just said the answer. Tana minei arbain zimnin, so he learned it from Rabbi Abahu 40 times, the Damele, and it appeared to him, Kaman demancha bekise, and it seemed like he had it in his pocket. He's got it's back pocket Torah. He can whip it out of his back pocket whenever he needs it. So why did he do this, Rebbe? It's a very strange thing. So he's a crowd of people, and he's learning it 40 times. It's a little odd. So I saw one of the Mefarshim says that what's going on, he's not in the Beis Medrash. Rabbi Abahu is just in the crowd, and they don't realize it's Rabbi Abahu. They don't realize the godless of this man who's there with them. So he says, to show the godless of Rabbi Abahu, he says, Rabbi, what about the Mishnah? Could it be, how do you teach the Reisha and the Seifa? He says, oh yeah, the Mishnah, I know the Mishnah, we were having a problem with the Beis Medrash. It was the Reisha was Oker and the Seifa was Toeh. Oh, beautiful, you teach the Mishnah. So now everyone turns and looks at Rabbi Abahu. Wow, you knew that, you understood the Mishnah? We didn't understand the Mishnah. It's difficult to understand. We need a fourth of the daf today to understand the Mishnah already. So he learned it from him 40 times. Could have just done Chazara 40 times, that would also be good, but he learned it from the Rebbe 40 times to show you that learning it from the mouth of the Rebbe has a chashivas, has an adifas, and everyone's watching Rabbi Abahu answer and explain this Mishnah in public, and it brings Yagdil to Rabbi Yadir, it brings godless to the Torah, greatness to the Torah. So beautiful. It's a little musar. Good. It's good. Even it's also good. You can say, don't be embarrassed to go ask questions. Even if someone's in a crowd and they're just schmoozing on Shabbos, Kiddush, whatever it is, they're schmoozing. Don't be afraid to go ask a Torah question, even in public. Even if you're in the shuk, even if you're anywhere in the supermarket, don't be afraid to go and ask your Rebbe a Torah question, because it'll be good. You get a good answer. It's none. So the Mishnah says, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, ma im Pesach shemuter lishmo. This is quoting from the Mishnah again. What about the Pesach, where it's mutter on Shabbos to do it l'shem Pesach, but kashashina es shmo, when you change the designation chayiv, he's chayiv for breaking Shabbos when you change his Pesach to something else, because now it's illegal to shecht it on Shabbos. Zvachim, other karbanos, non-Pesach offerings, shenasurin l'shman, you can't bring them on Shabbos. Shabbos is nidche only for the Pesach, not for other offerings. Kashashina es shman, when you change their designation, you're trying to change them now to become a Pesach, and udin shei chayev, certainly you should be chayev. So this is quoting Rabbi Eliezer from the Mishnah, and then the Gemara says, Im Isa, if our answer is true, that the Reisha is an oker on purpose, and the Seifa is a toeh, then it doesn't really fit with Rabbi Eliezer's kal v'chomer. Rabbi Eliezer's answer here to Rabbi Yeshua doesn't really fit that. Halo dame de Reisha be'oker v'Seifa b'toeh. So this logic doesn't really fit. If you say the Reisha is oker and the Seifa is toeh, the Seifa is making a mistake, because you can say, listen, Rabbi Eliezer, he's making a mistake. So rather the Gemara answers, Rabbi Eliezer lo shanele. Rabbi Eliezer doesn't make a distinction between oker and toeh, because Rabbi Eliezer, we see, doesn't hold by the concept that Rabbi Yeshua does of toeh b'devar mitzvah pater. Rabbi Eliezer says he's always chayev. He's not lemaisa. He changed the kedusha of the carbon. Doesn't matter whether it's toeh or oker, whether it's accidental or on purpose. He's not doing the mitzvah lemaisa. Rabbi Eliezer says he's chayev. It's only Rabbi Yeshua who cares if it's toeh or not, because toeh b'devar mitzvah, Yeshua is poter him from breaking Shabbos. So Rabbi Yeshua, the Shani Rabbi Yeshua does make a distinction, like I just spoke out, between toeh and oker. The Shani lehachi, we take out a hachi. It says the Gersa hachi kamarle. This is what he's saying. This is what Rabbi Yeshua is going to answer Rabbi Eliezer's logic. Lididi, for me, lo dame reisha beoker v'seifa b'toeh. It fits, it's good, that the Reisha is Oker on purpose. He's purposely redesignating the carbon Pesach to something else, and that's why they agree is Chayev. But the Seifa is Toeh, in a mistake. So I say, Rabbi Yeshua says, I say he's Pater. L'didach, for you, Rabbi Eliezer, you don't make a distinction. Lo im amrat bePesach. It's not like they say by a Pesach, Sheshina es shmo l'davar aser. If you change the Pesach to a different carbon, which you do not have permission to bring on Shabbos, so now changing your Pesach to something you don't have permission, is chayiv to breaking Shabbos when he slaughters that offering. Tomar bezvachim, can you tell me the same logic applies by something else, another animal, another offering, Sheshina es Sheman, and now he's changing it into a Pesach, or he's trying to change it into Pesach, the Devar Mutter, which is acceptable to slaughter your Pesach on Shabbos. And actually, it's the mitzvah, it's a requirement to slaughter your Pesach on Shabbos when Shabbos falls on the 14th. So he's saying, you're telling me you have a problem with he takes his Pesach and changes it to something else, so now he's chayav on Shabbos. I'm saying, because you're not allowed to slaughter something else on Shabbos, I'm saying you took something else and you're changing it into a Pesach where you do have a permission slip to slaughter this on Shabbos, so that should be pater, according to Toy b'devar mitzvah. Amar lei, Rabbi Eliezer. So Eliezer says back the logic, and this is paraphrasing the Mishnah, a morid tzibur yochichu. Those that are said about the public prove otherwise. Usually emori refers to emorim, which means the limbs, the pieces that would be burned on the fire the night after bringing the carbon. But here emori is lashon amar. Those are said about the tzibur. That's what Rashi points out. So the things that are said about the tzibur is the requirements of Shabbos, which is the 2 daily tmidim and also the 2 musafim of Shabbos. So there's 4 karbanos that are said that the tzibur has to carry them out on Shabbos. So obviously, if the Torah tells us to bring these on Shabbos, we have a permission slip to slaughter them on Shabbos. Shahed mutarin lishman. These are mutar when they are done lishman, when they're done for the sake of the tamid, for the sake of the musaf. But v'hashochet lishman chayiv. If he shechts something else for the sake of the tamid, he brings another shepsala into the base of mikdash and he slaughters it. Oh, l'shem tamid. Well, he already did the tamid. He's chayiv. He's chayiv. He's not doing a mitzvah anymore. Amar lo Rabbi Yeshua. Lo im amrat be'emerit tzibur. Says no. The same logic doesn't apply for emerit tzibur. You can't learn out from that to Pesachim in general that you're slaughtering something else the Shem of Pesach. Sheken yesh lahen kitzva. They have a limit. They have a number. Because there's only 2 tamidim and 2 musafim. There's only 4 of those. So if somebody's trying to bring in more animals and slaughter it l'shem tamid, l'shem musaf, we're not going to let him get away with that. Tomar b'Pesach, you can't say the same logic by a Pesach she'ein la kitzva, because there could be hundreds, there could be thousands, could be tens of thousands of carbon Pesach brought in one day. Remember, we learned just last week they were coming in 3 shifts, 3 different shifts of at least 10, but could be thousands of Jews in there slaughtering their Paschal lamb, their Pesach offerings. Could be thousands of these animals. So if somebody comes and brings a different animal and he's thinking about Pesach, he's thinking about doing the mitzvah of Shritas carbon Pesach, so there's no limit to those. So he could bring another animal and his mind is on the Pesach and he's making a mistake. He's toy b'devar mitzvah, Rabbi Yeshua says he's pater. So it's not like if somebody shechted something for a tamid or for the musaf of Shabbos. So this lashon ein lo kitzva, it reminds us straight out of the Haggadah, and it's coming up. We're almost to Purim, which means we're also almost to Pesach. Remember, we say in the Pesach that there's no kates, the Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. There's no limit to talking over the miracles of Exodus. We say Kol Amarbe Hareze Mishubach. Whoever adds more and more, it's praiseworthy to add more and more to Leil Seder, to give praises to Hashem. But there's an interesting diak you can make, and it's an amazing story. When they made a Seder in Bnei Brak, and we read this in the Haggadah. The Gedolei Ador, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva, they all went. They made Pesach in Bnei Brak with Rabbi Akiva, and it says they were up all night talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim until the break of dawn, and then the Talmidim came in and said, Rabbi Sainu, it's time. Higiyas man kriyas shema shacharis. It's time to daven. So they were up all night. Ein lo kitzvah, right here. Ein lo kitzvah. There's no end to the Pesach offerings. There's no end to Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. But here's the diak, Rabbi Isai. The Talmidim had left and gone to sleep. The Gedolei Ador stayed up. They kept going. But the Talmidim, they let them go to sleep. They say, well, whoever needs to go to sleep, just go to sleep. So you see from here, they had finished their Seder. They'd already eaten their afikomen. They weren't schlepping out the afikomen until daybreak. They had already done the Seder. They were done with the Seder, but they were still learning and talking in the miracles and the praises to Hashem Yisbarach, but they let the people who need to sleep go to sleep. So you see from here, it's a musar for some people, but it's an inspiration that you shouldn't hold people hostage to the afikomen. Understand? Because there's a shita, you're supposed to eat the afikomen before midnight. So maybe they held like that, probably they held by that, but they let the Talmidim who needed to sleep go to sleep. They let the women and children go to sleep. Tsar Balei Chayim is also deraisa. So Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is deraisa, but Tsar Balei Chayim also deraisa. So we see here ein lo kitzvah, but there's a diuk. Need to be sensitive to everyone's needs also. Good. So Lemeimra, are we saying in Rabbi Yeshua, to kol heicha the isle kitzvah, whenever there's a limit to doing a mitzvah, mechayev Rabbi Yeshua would no longer apply the concept of toy b'devar mitzvah. So he said here, if you're bringing an animal into the base of mikdash and you're shechting it l'shem a tami, l'shem a musaf, and it's not a tami or musaf. So you should be chayiv, because it's not like the Pesach where there's ein la kitzvah, where there's no limit to Pesach. So we say that whenever there's a limit, whenever there's a kates, that Rabbi Shua does not apply Torah b'davar mitzvah, and he's chayiv. Haray tinokos. What about the kids? What about the babies? This is talking about babies that need a bris milah. The yesh lahen kitzvah. There's a limited number of babies. It's none. And the Mishnah says, is Mishnah and Shabbos. Rabbi, so we just had this about 6-7 months ago, so it's a good review. It hasn't been that long that we were Osik and Shabbos. Okay, we're Osik and Shabbos every week. But you understand, Osik in the Daf Yomi of Shabbos was not that long ago. It's non, so there's a good review. Misha hayelo shnei tinokos. There's 2 babies here. Echad l'molo achar Shabbos. One of them was born on Sunday. He needs to get a bris on Sunday. Echad l'molo b'Shabbos. And one of them was born on Shabbos. He needs a bris on Shabbos itself. Now, it could be they were born in the same house. It could be they were twins. Because there could be a case of twins who get a bris on 2 different days. What happens is one was born late in the afternoon on Saturday, on Shabbos, and then 10, 15 minutes later, it's already after Shkia. It's already in Bein Shmashos, it's a suffix. It's no longer really clearly Shabbos. So in that case, when it's a suffix, you're not Doche Shabbos for the bris of the second twin. He has to wait until Sunday because he wasn't mamish born on Shabbos. There's a suffix. Or of course, if it was an hour later, it's definitely after Shabbos. Who didn't? Same case. So what happens? One baby needs a bris on Saturday. One baby needs a bris on Sunday. V'shachach. They forgot. They made a mistake. Umol es shel achar Shabbos b'Shabbos. And the baby who minadin, he needed a bris on Sunday. He got his bris a day early on Shabbos. Chayiv. They're chayiv for breaking Shabbos, for doing a malacha of milah. Now milah is a tolda of shchita. It's a chavala. It's wounding. It's a tolda of shchita. But you can also say that milah is also a makeh b'patish. Makeh b'patish is the finishing blow that finishes a kli and makes it shalom. Because we understand that Hashem made man in his image. We know Hashem is no body, in a spiritual image, in a dugma, but that man has the obligation to fix ourselves and to be mitaken ourselves. And part of that is the bris milah. Part of that is we do the finishing touch. We do a makeh b'patish, as it were, which is also malacha deraisa. We do a finishing touch on the child to enter him into the covenant with Hashem. So it's a finishing touch, but it's really, we classify it as a chavala, as a tolda of shchita. So he's chayiv for breaking Shabbos because he gave a bris 1 day early. This baby was not yet ready for a bris. What about the case of echad l'molo be'erev Shabbos, a Friday baby, echad l'molo b'Shabbos, and a Saturday baby? The shachach umal es shel erev Shabbos b'Shabbos, and for some reason the bris on Friday was delayed, didn't happen, and now they've got 2 babies sitting here. One of them should have had a bris yesterday, and one should have a bris today on Shabbos, and they accidentally do milah on the Friday baby today on Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev. Rabbi Eliezer, just like in our Mishnah, you're making a mistake while doing a mitzvah, you're still chayev chatas. Rabbi Shua poter. Rabbi Shua says he's poter. He's again toeh b'devar mitzvah. He's trying to do a mitzvah. He's thinking about that baby that needs a bris today on Shabbos, and he accidentally got the baby that should have minadin had the milah yesterday. So Rabbi Shua says poter. He's trying to do a mitzvah. Am Rabbi Ami hacha b'mayaskina. What are we dealing with here? Kagon shekadim umal es shel erev Shabbos b'Shabbos, where he went ahead and the first baby they did milah on was the erev Shabbos baby, the baby that should have been on Friday, but that bris on Friday got delayed. So now there's 2 babies sitting here in front of us, mazel tov, but one needs a bris today, and we can be doche Shabbos. We can do the bris on Shabbos because he was born on Shabbos. The other one, he needs a bris, lamaisa, but we can't do the bris on Shabbos because he was born on Friday. And what did the Moel do? He went ahead and he did the Friday baby first. So we still had that Saturday baby. The Gemara says, "De'ika chach de Shabbos." There was this Saturday baby, the Tarid baby. He's thinking about that. He's oseh. It's hard to translate Tarid. He's like involved in that. His mind is on the baby that needs a bris on Saturday. So he goes in and does a bris by mistake, thinking that this is the baby that should have got a bris on Saturday. But lamaisa, it was the baby that needed the bris on Friday, so should not have had the bris on Saturday. So that's why Rabbi Yehoshua says he's potter. He's toeh b'devar mitzvah. He's making a mistake while doing the mitzvah. Hacha, but here, by the case of the animals, someone brings in another animal and slaughters it for the sake of a tamid, for the sake of a musaf of Shabbos. Kagon shekadim v'shachtinhu le'mor tzibur. There could be a case where they already got up and slaughtered the public animals. They already slaughtered the tamid. They already slaughtered the musaf, and this guy's bringing in another animal from outside and slaughtering it. That we can't say he's toeh b'devar mitzvah. They've already done the mitzvah. That would be akin to the case of if they had the 2 babies there and they did the milah on the Shabbos baby first, and now only the Friday baby's left. So you already know we already did the Shabbos baby. The Friday baby shouldn't get a Mila today. And then they went ahead and they did it. He wasn't really thinking, but they had already done the mitzvah that needed to be done on Shabbos. There wasn't any more Mila to be done today. So Bereisha, sorry. They'd already done the Karbanas Tzibur, the Tamid, and the Musaf already. So if he brings in another animal and shechts it, there's no way we can say he's Pater. Ihachi, if so, Rabbi Meir Omer, Afashochet Hashem Amorid Tzibur Pater. So Rabbi Meir, remember in our Mishnah, was the very makel case. He was even more makel than Yeshua in applying the concept of Toeh B'Devar Mitzvah. He says even someone shechting an animal for the sake of a Tamid or a Musaf on Shabbos is still Pater. Afal Gav, even though Tekadim V'Shachtinu L'Morid Tzibur Bereisha, they had already previously slaughtered the communal offerings that are required that day. So they'd already done the Tamid, they'd already done the Musaf, and here comes Ploni Almoni with his sheep, and it says L'Shem Tamid. So Rabbi Meir says he's still Pater. Rabbi Shua would say he's Chayiv, because there's Kitzvah. Remember, there's a Kates, there's a limit. So the Karbanas Tzibur, Rabbi Meir's even more makel. He says he's Pater because he's thinking about a mitzvah. He's trying to do the mitzvah of Karban Tamid. That's what he's trying to do, and that's allowed on Shabbos. Rabbi Meir, we see, is even more makel in his application of the doctrine of Toeh B'Devar Mitzvah than Rabbi Yeshua. Tanya, like the Brisa says, Rabbi Yechia, Me'evel Arev, Rabbi Yechia, this is apparently a place. Evel Arev is a strange name. It's an interesting name. It means the Avelus of the Arabs, I'm not sure. But he says, Rabbi Meir. He says that Rabbi Meir told us, Lo nechlaku Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, al shahayilu shnei tinokos. He says, he goes back and re-explains the machlokis about the children, the tinokos, the babies that need a bris milah. So he says that Rabbi Chia says, Rabbi Meir told him that this was the real machlokis, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, about the babies. So he's switching it up now. You're going to see this is quite different than the first version. He says, Echad lamul erev Shabbos, if one of them needed a milah erev Shabbos on Friday, Echad lamul b'Shabbos, and the next one on Saturday, shachach, and they forgot. Umal es shel erev Shabbos b'Shabbos. And again, the Friday baby got delayed. They didn't do a bris on Friday, so now they're doing a bris on Saturday, but they accidentally do milah on the Friday baby that should not have gotten a bris today. So dechayev, that they agree there that both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua that he's chayiv on this. Al manachlaku, where do they disagree? Where does Rabbi Yeshua say pater? Al shahayilu shnei tinokos, when they had two babies, echad lamol achar Shabbos, one was a Sunday baby, echad lamol b'Shabbos, and one was a Saturday baby. V'shachach, and they made a mistake. Mol es shel achar Shabbos b'Shabbos, and they got the Sunday baby on Shabbos. To Rabbi Eliezer mechayev. Rabbi Eliezer is mechayev chatas because Lamaisa, the mohel has violated Shabbos by doing the shechita, the chavala on Shabbos that was not appropriate. This baby should have waited until the next day. Rabbi Yeshua poter. Rabbi Yeshua says he's poter. He's trying to do a mitzvah. The tispera, the Gemara says, does that make sense? Is this clear to you? What's going on is they're doing a milah on a Sunday baby on a Saturday. That's too early, Rabbi Osai. That's day 7 instead of day 8. Yom Shmini, Himo Basar Latai. The pasuk says day 8, so now they're not even doing a mitzvah because they're too early. Remember, in the previous case, they were doing a Friday baby on Saturday. That's day 9, but he's chayiv to do the mitzvah of milah. He shouldn't get it on Saturday. He shouldn't get it on Shabbos. Does not doche Shabbos, but Lamaisi needs a milah. This is a 7-day baby, and Rabbi Yeshua is telling you pater. It's very strange. So they explain ma chasam delo avid mitzvah pater. So here, in this case, according to Rabbi Meir's version, Rabbi Chia's version from Rabbi Meir explaining the machlokes, he's not even doing a mitzvah yet because he's giving milah to a 7-day-old baby. Pater Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says he's pater. Hecha deka avid mitzvah. So you can say where he's actually doing a mitzvah, where he had a baby that needed a milah on Friday, and now he's doing the milah on Saturday. He's definitely doing a mitzvah because this baby is already on day 9. He needs a milah. Mechayev. How could he say mechayev? How could Rabbi Yeshua say he's chayev? It seems contradictory to our first understanding of how the case of Tinokos works. Amid Rabbi Yanai, so in the Academy of Rabbi Yanai, they said Reisha Kagon Shekadim Amal Shel Shabbos Be'erev Shabbos. So the Reisha, the first case over here, is when they went ahead and did the Milah on the Erev Shabbos baby, Shel Shabbos Be'erev Shabbos. They switched them entirely. The Friday and the Saturday babies got switched, so they did the Milah already on the Shabbos baby too early. They did the Shabbos baby on Friday, and now the Friday baby they did on Saturday. So they've done a mistake already, and there is no Shabbos baby. Turning over to Amid Beis, Shelo Nitna Shabbos L'Dachos. So now there's no reason to Doche Shabbos, because they've already done a Milah too early on the Shabbos baby. So now what's sitting in front of us right now is the Friday baby. And the Friday baby, he needs a Mila Lamaisa, but he shouldn't get a Mila on Shabbos. You've got to wait till Sunday. Because he wasn't born on Shabbos, it's not Doche Shabbos to do his Mila then. Shalo Nitna Shabbos L'Dachos. V'Seifa, and the other version, Nitna Shabbos L'Dachos Etzloi. There is a reason to Doche Shabbos because you've got a Sunday baby, and the Sunday baby, you have a Sunday baby and a Saturday baby. No one's had a Mila yet, and here it is on Shabbos, and they accidentally switch them and do a Mila on the Sunday baby. But there was the Saturday baby, was right there in front of them, so there was a reason to Doche Shabbos for the Saturday baby. They just made a mistake and did Mila on the Sunday baby, so even though it was day 7, not day 8 yet, Rabbi Yeshua says Potter, because he applies the doctrine again, Toeh b'devar mitzvah is Potter from breaking Shabbos. Hacha, but here, in this case, where he's already done the Mila, where he hasn't done the Mila, where he has the Shabbos baby and the Sunday baby, Harei nitna Shabbos l'dachos, Hacha, here going back to Karbanos. So that's the case by the babies. If you have the Saturday baby and the Sunday baby in front of you, Shabbos is able to be nitche for the Shabbos baby. So if he did the Mila on the Sunday baby, Rabbi Yeshua says Pater. So, but here, Hacha, going back to the Karbanos, because someone brings in another animal and says L'Shem Tamid and shechts it, Harei nitna Shabbos l'dachos etzel karban tzibur. There is a reason to doche Shabbos, to push aside the restrictions of Shabbat, because you have to bring the Karbanos, the two tzmidim, two mesafim, that's required. So you could say, well, even if he didn't have a baby in front of him, because they'd already done a Mila on the Shabbos baby, he didn't have another baby in front of him, but Shabbos is nidche for Tinokus Dalma. There's somewhere in the world, Eliyahu's visiting a baby right now on Shabbos, this is assuming it's on Shabbos, to do the Bris Milah. So there's Bris Milah going on every single Shabbos in Klal Yisrael, God willing, every Shabbos there's a Bris. So, because Shabbos is nidche ba'alma, in general, it should be nidche. We could say that this Moel, who's giving a bris to the Friday baby, even though he's already done the Saturday baby early, we could say he's osik b'mitzvah, he's toah b'devar mitzvah. Amar legabe tahai gavra, mihalo is chayiv, is yochiv. Sorry, it says legabe this Mohel giving this bris to the Friday baby on Saturday, since the Saturday baby already got the Mila early, he did not have permission to doche Shabbos. So even though be'alma, there's a reason to doche Shabbos for karban sibur or for babies, generally speaking, there are babies who need a bris on Shabbos. Beautiful. But that doesn't mean this specific mohel in this specific city, this specific house, has permission to be doche Shabbos. You can't say his mind is on pushing aside Shabbos doing Mila, because the baby who needed a Mila on Shabbos already got the Mila. Beautiful. 2 dots. Sharkol zvachim sheshachtan l'shim Pesach. Going back to our Mishnah, other karbanos that you slaughtered for the sake of a Pesach, im einon re'uyin, if they're not worthy to be a Pesach, they're not a male sheep or goat in the first year, chayiv. Im ra'uyin Rabbi Eliezer machayiv chatos Yeshua poter. Again, toeh b'devar mitzvah poter. Man Tana deshanile ben re'uyin shen re'uyin. Who is the Tana who holds we make a distinction between an animal that would be fitting, ra'ui, to become a Pesach or not? That's Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya, there's a brayso that explains Shitas Rabbi Shimon. Echad hazvachim aruyin, ve'echad zvachim she'ena aruyin. It could be that whether or not these animals, these offerings, are fitting, or whether they're not fitting. Or someone who's slaughtering for a tamid or musaf for the requirements of the communal obligations, potter. Div Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Remember that Rabbi Meir is very makel in this doctrine of toeh b'devar mitzvah, that even if he's really making a big mistake, Rabbi Meir still says he's potter. Rabbi Shimon, he has a limitation on this. Lo nechlaku Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, al she'enan re'uyin shechayev. He says Rabbi Eliezer and Yeshua, they don't distinguish an animal that could not be fit for a karban Pesach. That's going to be chayev. Alma nechlaku al re'uyin, on animals that are fitting. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev chatos. Rabbi Eliezer does not apply toeh b'devar mishnah, so he's chayev chatos. Rabbi Yeshua poter. Rabbi Yeshua says if the animal was ra'ui, remember this second case of the Mishnah, if the animal is ra'ui and he switched the kedusha into a karban Pesach, so he shouldn't have done that. It doesn't work as a Pesach because it wasn't a Pesach to begin with. Rabbi Yeshua says he's toeh b'devar mitzvah and he's poter. It's interesting here that this is Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir arguing in their grand Rebbe. We all have grandparents. This is their grand Rebbe. How do we know? Because Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua taught Rabbi Akiva. Then when Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim passed away, he went and started over with a Chochmei Darom, with a limited number of Talmidim, and that included Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir. So they're teaching up, they're explaining the machlokus of their grand Rebbe. So it must have been they heard this through Rabbi Akiva. So it's interesting he's not mentioned, but they're still trying to figure out. So it's a musser to us. We should still try to figure out what our parents, our grandparents meant when they were teaching us Torah. We should still be thinking about that. So we know from Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't really understand until 40 years later. Sometimes we need to grow up a little bit to understand our parents and our grandparents and our Rebbeim. So it's a musser here that they're still trying to figure out what their grand Rebbe meant. So they say, so Rabbi Shimon says, when the animal was not roi, they agree that he's chayiv. We can't say tov b'devar mitzvah. It's only when the animal is roi, this is a 1-year-old male goat or sheep, you could change it to a Pesach, that's when Rabbi Yeshua says poter. Amar of Bibi, Amar Rabbi Elazar, poter haya Rabbi Meir, afilu egel shoziv shlamim. He says, even the holy cow, even a cow, which is going to be your shlamim, and he slaughtered it for a Pesach, sheshachtu l'shem Pesach, even Rabbi Meir would say that's toy b'devar mitzvah, and he's potter. So that's a cow, Rabosai. It's not a sheep or a goat. That's a big difference. So we say Rabbi Meir is very makel. Amarle Rabbi Zera, the Rav Bibi, Vahama Rabbi Yochanan, Motehai Rabbi Meir b'bali mumin. He says, what about a bal mum? What if it was a sheep or a goat, but it had a mum on it? Amarle b'bali mumin, lo tarid b'hu. He says a bal mum is not something you're involved with. On the 14th of Nisan, you might be involved with a cow. You're definitely involved with a sheep or a goat for your Karban Pesach. You might be involved with a cow for your shlamim, but you're not involved with a bal mum. You wouldn't bring a bal mum anywhere near the temple on the 14th of Nisan. The high tarid bay. And this, a cow, a shlamim, you might be involved with it. So we can say that if he shechts his cow for the sake of a Pesach, that Rabbi Meir can say he's potter. Now, obviously, Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Elazar would say he's chayav. Rabbi Meir would say potter. He's very liberal with his toy b'devar mitzvah doctrine. By Minei, Rava, Rav Nachman, chulin l'shem Pesach mai. What would Rabbi Meir say about bringing chulin, an unconsecrated animal, for the sake of a Pesach? My li, what would he tell me? Amar Rabbi Meir, Amar le, poter haya Rabbi Meir, afilu chulin l'shem Pesach. Even if he brought an unconsecrated animal, it was never a carbon before, and he brought it into the temple, and he shechted it on Shabbos, 14th of Nisan, for the sake of his Pesach, Rabbi Meir say poter. Rabbi Yochanan tells us something which implies otherwise. Moda haya Rabbi Meir b'bali mumin. He would agree that a bal mum would not be pater, he'd be chayiv. If he slaughters a bal mum for the sake of his Pesach on Shabbos, he's not pater, he's chayiv achatas for breaking Shabbos. Bali mumin lo michlefei. So we'd say no, bali mumin, we don't confuse them with a tam animal, with an animal that is fit and perfect to be a carbon. Chani michlefei, but a cow you might switch around with a goat or a sheep. Time with Rabbi Meir mishum ichlufei lo ichlufei is really the reasoning of Rabbi Meir that you're going to confuse this. This lashon ichlufei is chiluf, is switching around. You're going to confuse it. Hamar of Bibi, Amar Rabbi Elazar, poter hay Rabbi Meir afilu egel shel zivchei shlamim. The limud we had just before, Rabbi Meir says he's poter, even a calf which could be a shlamim sheshachtu l'shem Pesach. They slaughtered it for the sake of Pesach. Alma taima. To Rabbi Meir mishum de tarid, because he's tarid. Now tarid means he's involved. His mind is on that. So if his mind is on the Pesach, which should be a sheep or a goat, and he slaughtered his cow, which is he's saving other shlamim, you could say he's tarid. His mind was involved in the Pesach. Amrle tarid afogav lo micholaf. So he says yes. The reasoning of Rabbi Meir is both things. It could be that he's tarid. His mind is on this carbon Pesach, even though lo mecholaf, you don't really confuse a cow with a goat or sheep that easily. Or mecholaf, it could be confused with it. You could switch it around, which would be the case of chulin, a goat or sheep of chulin, which is not designated as a Pesach, so it should not be brought as a Pesach. But he switches it in his mind. He's mecholaf in his mind. He's confused with it. Afogav lo tarid, even though his mind is not on that animal. Afuke bali mumin, and this excludes only a bal mum. To lo ichlufei mecholaf, they're never going to confuse a bal mum with a regular tam. For lo mitra tarid, and his mind is not on a bal mum to offer it. So we see that a bal mum has no shaychus to the 14th of Nisan. We didn't bring a bal mum anywhere near there. So we see they must have been very careful to keep their animals checked and have no mum. Yati Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Akila, Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak. So they're sitting on the front porch. So usually guys sitting on the front porch, they're talking about stuff. So these guys are talking about Torah. So you see, sit on the porch and talk about Torah. V'yasve v'ka amrei amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, and they brought a statement of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Nischolov lo shvud shel nosar b'shvud shel tzli. What if they accidentally had a stick, like a spit, like a metal pole that you roast meat on, and one of the pole was nosar, it was leftover meat, it was beyond time, it was expired. It could have been from his Pesach, and it was the next day already, it's expired. and one was tzli, one was roasted meat of karbanos that he's supposed to eat. V'achlo, and so then he ate it. He accidentally ate the nosar, which is a problem. Chayev, so he's chayev for eating nosar. So that Rabbi Yochanan Amar, but Rabbi Yochanan says another case where he switched something around, and sometimes he's chayiv, sometimes he's not. The case of Ishto Nida Bol. A man lived with his wife when she was a nida, when she was seeing blood before she went to the mikveh. He's chayiv. He's chayiv. He's got a problem. He can't do that. Yavimto, but what about his yavama nida bol potter? But he lives with his yavama when she's a nida potter. So we got to explain the distinction here. A yavama is not his wife yet. That's his sister-in-law. And he has a mitzvah in the Torah if, God forbid, someone's brother passes away without any offspring, then Yavama Yavo Aleya. We have a mitzvah in the Torah that the surviving brother is supposed to marry the widow who has no children, and they're going to have children which will fill the shoes in a way for the deceased brother. And this is actually why back in Genesis, when Yehuda and Tamar got together, that was a case of Yibum. That was actually the first case of Yibum in the Torah, and that's why Tamar had twins. Because the twins were the spiritual tikkun, were the heirs, the spiritual heirs and the fix for both Er and Onan. So that's why Tamar had twins, because she needed to fill in for both brothers. Hashem made it work out that way. But the mitzvah from the Torah is Yivama Yivo Aleya, but if he doesn't want to, if they don't want to get married, there's a mitzvah of Chalitza, where they take off the sandal and they spit in front of the Bezdin, and they say, Zeh Chalutza Nal, they make an announcement, this man doesn't want to build the house of his brother, and then the widow is free to marry anyone, well, anyone except the brother. So this is the only time the brother can marry the sister-in-law is in the case of Yibum. So nowadays, the minhag, at least here, the minhag is to do Chalitza. Now you should know that 50, 60 years ago in Eretz Yisrael, there was a controversy, because the Dina de Machusa, the chief rabbis in Eretz Yisrael, said, we're not going to do any Yibum. Only do chalitza. Everyone does chalitza, and then all these immigrants showed up from Yemen and Morocco, mostly the Yemenites. The minhag was to do yibum. They always did yibum, because the Gemara. When we get to Seder Nashim in the Daf Yomi, we have a whole Gemara about yibum. We have a Gemara Yavamas. We have a whole Gemara about it. And the Teimanim, the Yemenites, they still did it, and there was a bit of a machlokis between the official, you understand, Ashkenazi-dominated rabbinates and the Yemenites, and this is where Rav Avadia Yosef Zatzal made a name for himself, standing up for the Yemenites and saying they have their Mesorah, they have their tradition, they have their custom, they have the Shulchan Aruch, who says you can still do Yibum. So fine, your minhag is do chalitza. Their minhag is do Yibum. Leave them alone. Let them be free. Understand that Yachad Shifta Yisrael, we're all Am Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, but every Shevet, Rabbi Yosai, had their own flag. Every Shevet had their own Nasi. So he was kind of standing up for sort of an individuality and local custom, the chashivas of your custom, minhag Avosenu, in Klal Yisrael, to continue that. So we're going to have to figure out what's the difference between Ishto Nida is Chayev, that's an Aveira, but Yevimto Nida is Potter. It's probably he shouldn't do that, but he's Koneh her. He's now doing a mitzvah of taking the Yavama as his wife. One of the ways we're going to see when we get to Yavamos in the Daf Yomi is they would simply get together, and then Mazel Tov, they're married, because they're sort of relying on the kedushin of the first brother who passed away, and then the second brother stepping into the shoes of the first brother. So they get together simply, and now they're Mazel Tov, they're a couple. You get to Amrei, so you could say Kol Sheken B'Hahi, that for sure by the meat to Machayev, to Lo Asa Mitzvah. There's no mitzvah at all. So by Ishto Nida, even Ishto Nida, we're going to see there's a, we call a shtickle mitzvah. There's a little bit of a mitzvah. We're going to explain why. And by the Yavama, there's definitely a mitzvah to Koneh the Yavama, because the Torah says he has to marry her. But by the meat, there's no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah to eat meat that might be nosar. Ista Amrei, or you can say the other way, B'Hahi Pater, by the meat he should be Pater. My taima chasam hu dahavale shuli, but by the women he should be chayev in both cases, both by his wife who's nida or his yavama who's nida, because havale shuli, he's supposed to ask her before they get down to the business of mitzvah. We're going to see they should actually check that there's no one involved is a nida. Avohacha, but here by the meat, to lo havale shuli, there's no one to ask. It's Rabosai, it's a spit of meat. There's no one to ask if it's nosar meat or it's perfectly kosher meat, so he would be potter. Lo, he would not be chayiv at all. So we asked this question that we all had: Why by the Yavama he's pater? He's doing the mitzvah of bringing her in. But by his wife, he should also be pater. He's also doing a mitzvah. He has his mind on a mitzvah anyway. He's tarid b'davar mitzvah. Nami kavid mitzvah. Be'ishto me'beres. She's already pregnant. Because Rashi points out, what's the mitzvah he would have in mind? Priya rivya. Priya revu. To have children. So his wife is already pregnant. And she saw blood during her pregnancy. So she's pregnant, but she's also a nida. Ha'ika simchas ona, but there's also a mitzvah to be sameach his wife from time to time. And remember, there's a famous Mishnah about how often this obligation applies. And it depends if the man's traveling out of town, maybe it's once a week. If he's a camel driver, maybe it's once a month. But if he's in town, local, it's twice a week. If he's doing hard labor, if he's not doing hard labor, it'd be every day. And the Talmud Chacham, it says Erev Shabbos. But there's a mitzvah of a certain time for a man to live with his wife. So that's simchas ona. It's called a simcha, but it's also a mitzvah. It's a requirement. We understand in the Ksuva, it writes you're going to give your wife sher ksus va'ona. Sher ksus is food, clothing. Ona is time. From time to time, there's a necessary level of marital intimacy, which is required in the Ksuva and required in the Torah. Shalom b'shas hanasa. So now it's not time. He's already fulfilled his minimal obligation. So it's not really time. Hamar Rava, but Rava says, Chayiv adam l'samech ishto b'davar mitzvah. So a person has to gladden his wife with the mitzvah of marital intimacy, and this is even when it's not necessarily the time. Now the Rashi here is very important. We're kind of running out of time, but get into it tomorrow. Rashi says, Afilu shlo b'shas nasa im roeh shemisavos lo. He sees that his wife is interested, then it's a mitzvah from the Torah to be with his wife. So what's going on that it's not a mitzvah? Samach levesta. It's near the time of her period. It's near the time that she's expecting to see blood. So vesis, remember we learned about taharis back in Nida, vesis kavua, vesis ena kavua, and she had to do a bedika for handling taharis to make sure she doesn't contaminate things that need to remain pure. So, but near the time of her vesis, there is a mitzvah, and Rashi brings down based on psukim. He's hartam. You have to warn the Jews not to go near their wife at this time. So it's a deraisa samach levesta. Now the Rishonim disagree whether this is one ona. In this case, ona means a 12-hour period. So Shulchan Aruch paskins one ona, and the Or Zarua has a chumrah of 2. So some people hold by the Or Zarua. So it's really 24 hours before a woman expects to see her normal cycle of blood. They have to separate. That's the chumrah of Or Zarua. But the Shulchan Aruch says 12 hours is the vesis. And you can actually get apps for this that track this, and you can turn on in the app. You can change the settings to Or Zarua setting or Shulchan Aruch setting or whatever the minhag is. So you see some people do follow that. But the Samach Levista, there's no mitzvah. There's no obligation. There's actually an obligation to refrain from cohabitation because she's about to experience a flow of blood and become a nida. If that's so, it should be also by the Yavama, also by the widow of his brother. Also, he should be chayiv if there's no mitzvah. It's samach levista. Yevimtu bozis minav. The Yevimta, she's not his wife yet. She's his deceased brother's wife. So she's more embarrassed in front of him. She's not going to tell him, what's going on with her personal calendar. Ishto lo bozis minav. But his wife herself is not necessarily. She should tell him. They should have an open relationship, open communication, to the point where she can tell him things that are potentially embarrassing, because he needs to know when she's going to become a nida, when it's going to be her vesis. We're actually going to leave it here for now, and we're going to bring you the Shulchan Aruch tomorrow on this topic, and we'll finish up. Tomorrow's a shorter daf, so we're going to get through all of these things tomorrow. Shkoyach Rabosai.